welcome to the Belgian Football Podcast. My name's Scott Coyne and I'll be your host for this week's episode. And joining me this week to review the week in Belgian football and what a week. It's always busy here across the Belgian football landscape, but we've seen some reasonably seismic news over the last few days. Two new coaching departures, one new imminent arrival as well. So it's been arguably a busier week than normal. And joining me to chew it all over first of all, our Joris is here as always. Hello to you, Joris.
Hi. I was talking about a turbulent week last week, but yeah, this week it's both in private life, in global politics, and in Belgian football. It seems to be even worse. But yeah, it's a roller coaster we all go on.
Yep, the global politics is for the spin-off pod, which will be a week-long special in light of how things have been going. Also joining me this week and returning to the BFP sooner than any of us expected, including our guest himself, is former Beveren Chief Executive Antoine Gobin, who we're delighted to have back with us because of the massive news affecting the Challenger Pro League this week. Welcome back, Antoine.
Thanks for having me. I'm actually surprised that I accepted, so glad to be back.
Either that or he enjoyed himself so much a fortnight ago when he was with us that you just had to come back for more.
I don't think I've ever texted you that much. So something then in the last 2 weeks with all the news happening. So something must have happened on that podcast for me to become even more addicted to it.
Podcasting gets in the blood. Once it's got you, it never really leaves you, that's for sure. And what an opportune week for you to return as well. A sledgehammer has been taken to the league format, or a sledgehammer of sorts anyway. The Pro League change is old new change, if you like. We're going to be resetting back to an 18-team Pro League. And a slightly more complicated situation and change ahead for the Challenger Pro League. Joris, do you want to, and this is where I'm going to drop you in it, shall we start this week, since we're going to start with the Challenger Pro League, which we don't normally do, but we're going to do that because the news affecting the Challenger Pro League is really interesting. And I think a lot of people want to hear more on this. So we're going to give this some airtime and some justice. Do you want to recap to everybody, Joris, essentially the basics of the changes affecting both the Pro League and the Challenger Pro League?
The Pro League goes back to 18, as we talked about last week. That's the easier one, I guess, with two teams relegating. And, well, the difference of what we thought of last week, it's not taking place next season, upcoming season yet, but one season later, which, well, for one thing makes sense, at least. Challenger Pro League, a little more complicated. There's the main thing there is that the youth development squads will be protected. There must be at least 4 youth squad, so under 23 squads in that division. It could become more over time, if I'm not mistaken. I could be, to be honest, but it cannot be less than that for some payments that they will get to, and that would be effective immediately as things stand. I don't know if there would be complications for one of the for young Genk. Let's not beat around the bush. For if they would be really going down, if there might be some legal action, I would see that coming if some other side would need to go down instead of them. And I also don't really see this holding up, but okay, I'm not a legal expert in this matter, but or in any matter, to be fair. But and that division would then consist of. That's where I'm now. You caught me here. I think is it 14, 15, or 16 sides in the end, depending on youth squads and so on as well, and the situation. If I'm not mistaken, but correct me if I'm wrong there. And the main thing is really those youth squads, the under 23 squads being protected, which goes against the whole point of having them, in my opinion, as well. To give you my first 2 cents already, at least.
Yeah, there's kind of so much to pick apart in this in terms of how it affects the Challenger Pro League. I thought that Locheren's chairman, Hans van Duisen, had some really interesting comments in the aftermath of this vote. In the last few days, he was saying that, you know, they're obviously unhappy with the way that this came about. And that the whole arrangement is more opportunistic than it is genuinely strategic, and underlining that the main sticking point, as Joris was saying, there seems to be a situation where the academy sides are ring fenced, are protected, aren't able to be relegated. And his feeling, or Locheren's feeling, is that, you know, there has to be a one size fits all approach to this, and either everybody can be relegated or nobody can, and it's essentially a protected division. There's so much here that's kind of still a little bit unknown. Wiggle room for change as well, because obviously the licensing arrangements for sides in the amateur division and how that impacts them is going to have an impact on some of this as well longer term. So the exact makeup over the next 2 or 3 years of the CPL's going to change. What were your initial thoughts, Antoine, when this news kind of broke? Because I think there was, up until quite late on, there was still an air of doubt as to whether a vote would actually take place and what would actually happen.
So my first reaction was, especially when I saw some of the DAZN content over the weekend about some of the club presidents saying, finally, we have a format for the next couple of years. That interview could have come from last year, the year before, or the year after, or the year before that. It seems like we always finally have a long-term format. I mean, in the 4 years that I was in Beveren, we had one season where one team got promoted, one season where 1.5 team got promoted, one season or 2 seasons where 1.5 team, and one season where 2.5 teams got promoted. So 3 different formats in 4 seasons. For me, it's not the definition of stability. When it first came out, my first reaction was, how much did it cost? And by how much did it cost, it's twofold. One, for the big clubs, the G7, G6, however we want to call it, how much did it cost them to essentially pay for the K11 and part of the CPL to vote for it? And by that, I mean solidarity payments from TV rights distribution and U23 teams. And so I think saying that it's or on one hand, I completely agree with the concept of all teams in a division should be treated the same. If you start ring fencing around U23 teams not being able to relegate, then the scenario where, let's say, you have 16 teams in the CPL and 16, 15, 14, 13 are all U23, it's going to feel massively unfair for number 12 to relegate. But I liked the idea, and I had thrown out the idea last year or the year before of 2 teams relegating, the lowest U23 and the lowest pro team, so that there were, and from the amateur divisions, the highest U23 and the highest pro team could also go up. So essentially giving an option for mobility both on the pro side and the youth side, because right now, if I understand correctly, it would be Ghent, Genk, Brugge, and Anderlecht. What happens to the Young Reds? What happens, to another youth program that potentially in the next couple of years gets money pumped into them? There's also closed upward mobility for youth programs. All Standard Liège youth or Antwerp youth now are going to think, wait, I'm a lot better suited to go to Anderlecht or Genk if I want pro minutes, and if I don't necessarily think that in the next year or 2 I can get first team minutes at my club. So there's also a question for those clubs. But when I see when I see U23s having to stay in the CPL, I, as an operator, obviously see 4 times €1 million payment that then gets distributed based off of licensing regulations. So the licensing rules are going to have to be clear for who gets to share that money from the U23 teams. Is it based on stadium? Is it based on the wage bill ratios? Is it based on net equity? Whatever it is, those are for licensing committee and Niels van Brantagem and his team to figure out. It feels like their goalposts are unfortunately changed almost every year as well, so it's difficult for them. But between that and the solidarity payment going from 4 to 5.5 million, all of a sudden you have, between that and the commercial rights, to name the league Jupiler, to have all the sponsorships that are linked to Belgian football, you'll get roughly 10 million or a little bit more distributed to CPL clubs, to the 10, 12, whatever amount of pro teams. I don't know. And if you just do rough calculation, all of a sudden your average TV rights payment, or average payment from the league or from the rights holder for teams in the CPL, just went up to 300,000 euros. And those 300,000 euros to some fans may seem like a drop in the bucket, when you look at it from the broader scheme of things. But if you look at that the recent financial report about Belgian clubs that came out, I think last month, I think you had 3 or 4 teams that were within minus 2 to 300K. So all of a sudden you actually puts more clubs in the black. It also makes losses slightly less painful, whether it's local owners like Lokeren or Temse. Sorry, they're not Lokeren, they're Temse, or Lierse. So it's a matter of, it's not about integrity and how much does it cost. I think it's a matter of the lesser of two evils. We're obviously only talking about the CPL here. I think JPL we can have, in a couple of seconds, our JPL look on it. But from a CPL perspective, I see this as a step towards financial stability. Is it a lesser of 2 or 3 or however many evils? I think so. I think it's just something that you have to deal with. And if this is the first route towards potentially having a closed league, then maybe maybe the CPL mimics Holland, where the only teams that can relegate are teams that miss licensing regulations, and if there's a team from the amateur ranks that's ready to go up. But for that to happen, you have to have the green light from the amateur wings, and that'll never happen. So for me, this makes a ton of sense for a majority of CPL teams, and it'll make a stink, especially in the short term, because who knows what happens in terms of the relegations this year for the teams that are towards the bottom of the ranking, which is Sorin, which is surprisingly Lommel, Eupen, Temse. Yeah. So I think they got it fine. I don't want to say right, but I think they could have done significantly worse. They did really not that bad from a CPL perspective.
And where do you think all of this leaves us at the moment from a legal perspective? Because there's been so much noise around the unfairness of certain sides not being able to be relegated, and the emotional response to that. Do you think that perhaps as a little bit of time passes, a few weeks pass, and clubs get a chance to let this idea settle and think about it? I mean, you outlaid the reality of the economics behind it really nicely for us there, because a lot of fans have responded in a way that you would imagine very emotively to it, as fans often do. but without a kind of full understanding of the context of the impact of what they see as a very small extra injection of money. But as you were saying, for a lot of clubs, that is going to be the difference between being in the black and being in the red. So it actually isn't insignificant when you understand it within a wider context. But do you feel that if a little bit of time passes and as clubs talk to each other, their own initial kind of anger around perhaps how this has come about and how the negotiations went subside, that the potential legal action that could come of it will recede into the distance and maybe not appear at all once people appreciate what you've laid out there, the economics of it?
But I've only heard a minority of clubs be still against it. So the majority of CPL clubs are fine with it. The majority of I was watching, the tweets that you guys had throughout the week of the different club presidents or CEOs reacting to, and most of them are saying, yeah, it's fine. Do we love it? No. But do we understand it? Sure. And that's a ton more than anything that we've had in the last 3 years, where immediately after a vote or a no vote, and so you stay in the status quo, there was chaos everywhere. And to have the majority of teams say, it's fine, it's not the best, but it's far from being the worst, so we're fine with it. It protects small to medium-sized clubs. Are there some concessions? Sure, but to have an agreement, all sides have to make a concession. It seemed that potentially, maybe the process wasn't a transparent or mature, or I wasn't in the room, but the result was completely fine. Judging from the reactions of the majority of clubs. And you have some clubs that are saying, we don't agree with it, but we still voted for it because it's in the greater good. Others said, we don't agree with it, and so we voted against. Yeah, it's democracy right there. But I think most clubs are going to be thankful, maybe not thankful, but the majority of clubs who reluctantly voted for are going to understand why, when the first TV rights payments, second, solidarity rights payments come in July, and then September, and then December, and then February, and there's 50K, per every 2.5 months more than what there was the previous year. And that might seem extremely callous and financier on my behalf. And it's the furthest thing from football as a fan wants to talk about, but that's also the reality of it. And you can't say, I can't believe, as a fan, you can't say, I can't believe that clubs would sell out for something so unfair sportingly, and then at the same time say, oh my God, how is it possible that just in the last 3 years, 4 teams have gone bankrupt? There has to be some consistency. Deinze with those owners would have gone bankrupt anyways, and that's horrible for the club. Moucron, you see everything that's going right in Bordeaux and in Boavista right now, and that's extremely unfortunate for the club there. But maybe in the last 4 or 5 years, I've heard so often that the CPL is a cemetery for clubs, and maybe this it's not the Club Med, but maybe this makes it less gauntly and cemetery.
Maybe a populistic or a point to make here is, of course, of course, having more money will be good, and of course then it's more in I'm a bit skeptical about, that's a later step, of course, how that money will be spent, and if that will be wisely, and if it's not just adding more money to spend, and maybe clubs taking more risks because of it. That's of course something you can't really judge. It's a comment more than a question, I guess. But
just in the last couple of days, like 2 young player decisions around their national teams, Talbi and Caretsas. They had, I remember watching Talbi. It's funny, Talbi, Chemstin Talbi and Tierno Bari exchanged jerseys at the end of a match when Tierno was with us, and when Tierno posted like a video of him working out with Talbi's jersey on, Club Bruges fans were all, inundating us, and he, I texted him. I was like, "What are you doing?" He was like, "Oh, I'm sorry. He's just a friend." And I was wearing his jersey. I was like, "It's fine." We laughed about it. But both of those guys came from U23s, went up, and they're on their way to becoming international names. Unfortunately, not for Belgium, but they're on their way. And Talbi, amazing match in Europe a couple of weeks ago. Caretsas, I think his first full season with Genk, he's seeing how difficult it is physically to hold up. But that is also what the U23s are going to bring to the CPL in terms of visibility. And fans of the teams where those players will undoubtedly end up will start looking at the second division to see who the new talents are. Our striking, our strikers last year, Youssef Saleh is now scoring goals with Cardiff City. Koyalipu is now scoring, I think he scored 2, but he's now playing with Lens. Tierno the year before, we all know, but it's not just the U23s, it's granted, I'm happy to say that not all other CPL teams can boast having a championship and a La Liga and a Ligue 1 player, so kudos to our team there, but the results aren't like this. Viewership numbers are still horrendous, so it is what it is, unfortunately. Stadiums, we had 900 season card holders when we started at Beveren, and now there's over 2,500 playing in a division lower. So for the clubs that want to work smart, you look at a Liers, you look at a Molenbeek now, like there's fervor in the stands. And the second division, if you're a fan of a second division team, you're not going to say this division is shit. You're going to say maybe other teams are shit. Sorry, pardon my French. But you know how tough it is to get out. You know how you know what to expect from different pitches, from different teams, from different mentalities. You understand the particularities of 1 week playing a U23 team and the next playing, a team of 32-year-olds who seem like they want to play ice hockey against you. So it's a really interesting league. You don't quite have that dynamic in the Eerste Divisie in Holland, just because the games are a lot more free flowing and it seems less structured defensively. And I watched quite a few Eerste Divisie matches with our sister club being Den Haag. But there's no, couple years ago, there was a formula to get out of the second division, and it was get older players that know the division, 27 to 30-year-olds, overpay, go to first division, and then hope that stability of your core will, keep you keep having decent results going in your first and then second season in the JPL. You have totally different types of teams now getting promoted. Dender and Beerschot last year were quite different. So Waregem this year and Molenbeek. Molenbeek looks nothing like the Molenbeek of 3 years ago. So it's, you do have stories of those wily veterans making an immediate change. We could talk about Beveren in a couple of minutes, but it's a super interesting league now. I think it'll keep on getting more interesting with, if teams continue to work smartly and don't just put that 200 or 300K into players, and instead put it into equity, so that there is a security blanket for when things go wrong potentially, or put into infrastructure. So maybe they can start integrating more youth players into, so I think in the end, rising tide helps, helps all boats. Some boats are bigger, so some boats are going to go faster, but I'm curious. I'm curious for so if this is going to actually last 5 years or 4 years or however long. I'm curious what the immediate impact of the potential legal battle with the relegation of, what happens from this year to next. But I'm curious to see if this actually leads to stability and if we can go 2 years in the CPL without having a team go bankrupt.
And what's your take on the big news this week, Joris, now that the dust has settled a little bit? Because your team, Genk, has been at the centre of a lot of discussion, or more specifically, obviously, Young Genk have, and that whole question that we touched on not too long ago, in fact, more than once, the question of, are Young Genk too big to go down? Too big to die from a truly competitive league. What's the Genk fan base saying?
Well, I guess it's divided a bit. I guess some people are like, well, it's clear Genk played a crucial role in like at least the final voting, even though I guess all sides basically have been opportunistic anyway. But it came down to the Genk vote in the end, and they switched sides since they have always been, as I personally also have been fans of the playoffs, and they were willing now to sacrifice that in exchange for Young Genk being being secured in the locked in the Challenger Pro League. Yeah, it's a bit very up to. I personally don't feel like this is the right thing to do. Also, in the sense of the development of the young players themselves, to go a bit away from the financials, but that like just like it's part of their development as a youth player at one of the top sides. You will be fighting for championships in your regular younger younger divisions, under 13s, for example, or in the 15s. And once you reach that stage, you also need to learn a bit more to fight. And I'm curious how that is when that incentive goes away. Like fight for like relegation. Sometimes one season like this, one season will be maybe better. Like Young Genk now has these 3 seasons there, 2 seasons they struggled. Last year they were actually fine, even though they even struggled in the beginning there. It's part of the learning process of those players as well, to become the players that indeed get into the senior squad as well, and get a bit more resilient. And if the relegation is part of that, I mean, that's still of course on sportive grounds, like, then so be it. And then you would go. So I personally am not a fan of that switch of the vote and so on, regardless of how it all panned out, regardless of being a decisive vote, but just as a vote as a vacuum, I guess, in a vacuum. I would have not gone that opportunistic, but I know, I mean, like I said, everyone in that room will have been opportunistic, and is not as idealistic as some fans. I'm not always, but in this case, I guess I am a little bit more than people in that room. For anyways, and I think it's been smart from Genk to not have given any real comments on it as well, to keep away a bit of the storm as well. But that's another topic.
I was actually in contact this week, guys, with a Pro League club president who probably shall remain nameless at the moment, because I don't have permission to use this quote, so I won't attribute it to the individual's particular name. But he did say to me, when I asked him what his opinions on the vote were and how the negotiations went, he described it as like farmers and turkeys both voting for Christmas, which I thought was a really interesting way of putting it. I'm now about to tell both Joris and Antoine who that was in our private group chat, so I will unveil that individual there.
I'll try to guess later.
Yeah, Antoine's going to guess first to see if he can get some bonus points. So moving on to the on-field action this weekend, the Challenger Pro League, we've reached match day 24. and are hurtling towards the end of the season and those playoffs. Ral beating Eupen 2-0. Beveren winning 3-2 against Zulte in the big game of the weekend, a game that was enjoyed particularly by a certain Christian Bruls, who coming into this game might not have directly used the word revenge, but certainly it was quite clear that he was up for this game. You know, we know he'd had a miserable time for the most part at Zulte, so this was a fixture he was looking forward to, and in fact he was playing. He played quite well in this game. Lots of passes with the outside of his foot as well. So I thought he's definitely up for it. Line-breaking passes with the outside of his foot.
He got one. He got one to Alex Corraine for the second goal.
Yeah, lovely. Real bit of quality there. Perhaps Christian needs to play against Zulte every week. Perhaps that's the secret.
I'm good if Beveren gets to play against other teams, because that Zulte team is really good.
Elsewhere, we saw Patro beating Club Next 1-0, RFC Liège beating Anderlecht Futures 4-2. Young Genk, who've been at the centre of a lot of this controversy, they lost 2-1 against Lokeren Temps. Lommel and Serang finished 2 each. More on Lommel shortly. There's a bit more news about them this week as well. And Frank Baran beating Lierse 1-0. So in terms of the bigger picture, Zulte are still top. Feels like they've been top for forever. But, you know, their lead is being whittled away somewhat, that's for sure. They're sitting on 49 points at the moment. Molenbeek are breathing down their neck on 47. And Ral remain very much part of the conversation. They're on 46 points. So 2 of these 3 obviously are going to go up. And it looks like it may very well go to the final weekend before we actually know. Lommel, as I was saying, still in deep trouble, really. Winless in 12 now. They appear to have reached an agreement with Lee Johnson. I think he's been in Belgium over the last few days, discussing a temporary move till the end of the season to Lommel. Curious to get your guys' thoughts on this appointment. I think this is a really odd one, actually, a really odd one, as odd ones go. Lee's last 2 T1 appointments were pretty unmitigated disasters. His time at Hibs and his time at Fleetwood were really not good, and both of those fan bases, are you know, I think saying not fans of Lee's work would be putting it rather mildly. The Hibs fans in particular, you know, towards the end of Lee's time, were looking to literally lynch him. So he's not had a good experience at his last few clubs. And over the summer, he was actually brought in by City Football Group to work with their own development squad in preparation for the season ahead. And I think he's really developed some of his contacts inside CFG, which probably has played a big part in leading to this appointment. But the strange thing for me, guys, is when you consider how massive that network is worldwide and how long they haven't made a coaching appointment, and how long Lommel have really been drifting since Steve Bold stepped away for family reasons. It's just extraordinary to me that this would be their choice at this time, even on a temporary basis. But perhaps any appointment is better than no appointment at the moment. That's maybe one way of looking at it. What's your feelings on it, Joris?
I personally don't have that many feelings. I kind of want to pass the ball to both to Scott and when he's back, probably next week, Ben, because I've seen some opinions flying around in our WhatsApp group as well. Anyway, but I personally don't know him that well, so it's a bit a sad thing to say in a podcast. Maybe not good content, but except for that CFG thing and like what you mentioned, your last comment there, like it took so long, and then taking this manager, it seems a bit strange. That to say the least. That yes, but apart from that, I can't really judge, so I won't at the moment yet.
I think it's worth pointing out before we get Antoine's thoughts on it, because it's such a strange appointment. I don't think I'll ever get used to that. Lee doesn't really have a noticeable track record in developing young players either. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure how he even fits Lommel's model. To be honest, that's another thing about it that I think is a bit strange. Obviously, the City Football Group relationship, which started over the summer, is probably the biggest element to it. As well. But yeah, just in terms of his general profile as a coach, he doesn't seem to kind of fit what they're looking to do there really in a way as well. So it's an odd one. We should remind everybody, and depending on when you listen to this episode, this isn't quite official yet. This is something that hasn't quite got over the line. The agreement has been mostly reached, and it might be done by the time you hear this episode as well. But it's a very odd one in a week which has seen a number of coaching changes.
So, incoming Lommel coaches, it seemed maybe last year was really the first year where they had very clear priority of we want to promote to the first division so that we could have our talent, or players that are coming through Lommel as part of the CFG development model could be a step above. And, it's difficult to convince South American or British players to spend a year in Belgian second division. But if you're playing in Belgian first division, you would rather take a loan out there than go to Ligue 2 or go to the championship or things like that. So that from a overall CFG holding company strategy, that's why for me every year that they're in the CPL is just wasted. To be honest, and right now, so you mentioned Lee Johnson's track record, which I only know because of Sunderland Till I Die, and he came later on, I believe the last season of Sunderland. Joris, you're looking as if that's where you know the name.
It rings a bell now, yes.
But he's not there to develop players right now. They have a match at Zulte Waregem and then home against Patro, and then there's 2 weeks off. But they can very well be 3 points up, or even potentially tight on points. I mean, Genk plays at Club Brugge and against Ral. It's going to be tough to get 6 out of 6 there. But they can. Lommel's not in development mode right now. Lommel is in. We don't know what the legal status is going to be of the league. We don't know if Young Genk is safe and we actually have to compete against Seraing or Eupen or, they need points. And here is a coach who does not know the league, does not know or knows the talent and the group from inside, but is going to need adaptation time from a cultural perspective. That's very real, especially as a coach. If you had told me that he had been appointed in the last couple of months as a support system for Bold and for the sporting team, and had been in and out, and starting to get some of the intricacies, sure, I could maybe see the pathway. And maybe that's the case. We don't know. I can ask people at CFG, but it's not high on my priority list at the moment. But it just, I mean, it seems out of nowhere. It seems weird. If this were at the beginning of the season, okay, maybe, and prove to us as a developer or as a coach, for results, whatever. But you're bringing in a complete unknown with a squad that is struggling, that needs some type of direction. When you see the Belgian leaders, the Belgian elders of that team, the vocal leaders in the press saying that throwing some of their younger teammates under the bus, saying that the club, their coach had sort of lost their trust, and it seems like they're navigating blindly. They all seem lost, and I don't know if turning to a coach who is discovering the continent. I think I don't know if he's ever coached on the continent. let alone in second division Belgium. Yeah, would love for him to play tiki taka to a 4-0 win at Zulte Waregem and shut me up. Don't think it's. I watched the match against Seraing. I don't see that happening now. But yeah, careful.
Yeah, your point about cultural adjustment to a different footballing landscape, particularly for a coach who hasn't coached overseas before, is, and even if they had, you know what I mean, there's some very real dangers there. I'm sure when our Ben returns, because he had a very strong reaction to this news today, very strong. Ben knows Lee's work of old at a number of clubs, through obviously his own allegiance to Reading. I've seen some of Lee's more recent work up close at Hibs in Scotland, obviously with me being based in Scotland as well. So, yeah, our Ben was very strong in his response to that today, and definitely wants to come back to that. So, you know, we may return to the Lee Johnson conversation when this is likely to be confirmed over the next few days, next week. Let's take the step up, shall we? Step up to the top table, the Jupiler Pro League, which has reached Matchday 28. It is also hurtling towards its own playoffs and the proper business end of the season. This weekend saw Charleroi drawing 1-1 with Genk, Cercle drawing 0-0 with Antwerp. Ghent and Club Brugge finished 1 apiece. St Truden beat Kortrijk 4-2. Union Saint-Gilloise appear to be the big winners of the past weekend for the second week in a row. They thumped Dender 4-1. Beerschot saw off not only Mechelen 1-0, but saw off Besnik Hasi in the end. We'll touch on that in a second. Standard and Anderlecht finished 2-0 to Anderlecht in the Classico, and Leuven and Westerlo finished goalless. So we'll start at the top, shall we, Joris, and your boys. Little eye roll there for everybody who I'll give everyone a hint. Joris is going to have to psych himself up to find the positives this weekend. Give us your take on how your boys did this week, Joris.
After the weekend, a lot more happy than after the game itself, I guess. So even one day later already. But yeah, not the best of games from Genk. They still probably should have won it. Tolo missed a bit too many chances to my liking, especially being a top scorer in the league. Luckily, he eventually did score one, even though that actually was more like of a lucky finish. But I hope it gives him a little more confidence, because they will need him. I feel like Genk is starting to rely a bit too much only on his goals and on Sturker's creativity and assists, also sometimes goals, but that are mainly penalties, if I'm not mistaken, so far. So, yeah, there needs to be a bit more offensive output from other players as well, and or Tolu needs to, to step his level up, even despite scoring here. Yeah, just hope that goal gave him enough confidence to go through further. All the positives, yeah, I guess Penders actually had a few good saves as well to keep Genk in the game. Yeah, and of course, two draws now, not ideal right before the playoffs and before a few difficult games to enter the regular season as well. But nothing too dramatic either. No losses, difficult games as well. So I mean, and given other results, it's not too horrible. Of course, Union is taking a lot of advantage out of it, but I'm yeah, some teams will do that at some point, and they are a good side. So that's I don't like to see that too much, but that's yeah, nothing that's in their own hands. So yeah, I mean, not the best result. Quite unhappy on Friday night after the weekend, and given other results, slightly more positive. Again, yeah, but of course with the caveat of Union taking a lot of advantage and being coming closer and closer, and then definitely being in the race, as I've never denied that they were, but yeah, definitely they are proving that they are. On Charleroi then as well, I guess a bit. They played quite well for the second time against Genk, so it's also it's not that was very surprised that it was in the end only a draw. they could have scored more as well. Yeah, with this point, it's not enough, I guess. Well, in the end, but if they had any hopes for anything more, still, but they are at least for looking upwards. But yeah, for looking down, they are. I think they're officially saved because of other games between the sides beneath them. Otherwise, I mean, they are safe now. So at least that goal is reached. But they could have aimed for more, maybe, though. The same story of the season, I guess, as well. They had their chances, didn't take them. Yeah, there were a few. I don't want to talk too much about the refereeing this time. Anyways, at both sides, there were some phases that could have gone differently. Ultimately, yeah, I mean, no big mistakes there, I think, and unlucky that he couldn't hold on to the lead. That's something that I'm less happy about, of course, as well. Like they don't see that very late on in the game, even if it was a penalty. Yeah, the game management, it has gone well for a long time. You can't always win them either, but of course, at this stage, it's mainly about getting the points over the line, and it's not a good time to start losing that habit of keeping a small difference towards to the end. So the second away game, something happens. Second time it happens on a penalty as well, and against the Walloon side. But last time it was luckily with a bigger margin, so it didn't matter that much.
My question to you, Antoine, around this, well, it goes beyond this game actually in relation to Charleroi. How underappreciated generally do you think Rick DeMille and his work there has been?
I remember what I said last time. It feels like ages ago that I was already speaking his praises, but yeah, I mean, was surprised by how honestly how poor Genk's finishing was, especially in the second half. But from a purely statistical perspective, Charleroi is the fourth best team in the league right now. So even though they can be, from a budgetary perspective, you could say, okay, we're fighting in our weight class and we're in the first half of the league and will participate near the top of playoff twos. And if you ask most Charleroi fans at the beginning of the year if they were fine with being in between 7th and 10th, I think they would take it. But they've been performing really well, led by obviously an ex-Beveren player, Dan Heymans. But no, it's solid team, well organized. You saw, you sense that they were going not just for the tie but for the win. There were a couple of times where, for example, Stulic had a header or an opportunity, or there was an overlap that was missed on the wing, and the players, they didn't just accept it. They seemed legitimately disappointed, not just that they had missed it, but we should be doing better. We're neck and neck with the league leaders, and we should still be doing better. That's a pretty good mentality. They weren't just happy to be there for the 1-1. They weren't, they I think if you look at the reactions at the final whistle, there were actually some of the heads that also went down on the Charleroi side, like, we missed an opportunity. That says a lot. So I'm looking at the points in the table right now. Is it too late for them? Yeah, it's too late for them to look upwards. They're safe going downwards. They are going to have a couple of fun matches against Standard in the next months. That's always electric from an atmosphere perspective. But Standard, on the other hand, still the second worst team in the league from a statistical perspective. Anderlecht should have won 3 or 4-0, but yeah, kudos to Rick and to his whole team, to the players there. Hopefully there's some stability, or for Charleroi fans, hopefully there's stability there in the summer going forward, because I think they have pretty stable ownership, whether fans like it or not. The club has never been in danger financially, and there's been periods where there's been more ambition, less ambition, but it's been a pretty decent model for stability. And I think they have possibly good tools to pretend for top six next year. Although top six next year doesn't matter because there's no playoffs. So
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny how things change.
I'm gonna have to get
Absolutely.
used to that. I'm gonna have to get used
Next
to
year,
that.
next year still though, right?
Is it?
I believe so. Huh?
Yeah. The transitionary
It is
year.
a transition year.
Yeah.
It's look at that. Even I'm confused as a fan.
Yeah.
Imagine how confused I'd be as a director.
It happens to us, and we watch closely. That's how often it changes. Speaking of changes, perfect segue there. Our next game, which did finish goalless, Cercle and Antwerp, a result that doesn't help either side in terms of their respective big pictures, but it did have a material impact on one particular coach who's no longer with us or no longer with his club. Jonas De Roeck has parted company with Antwerp, or to be more correct, Antwerp have parted company with Jonas. Yep, he's left the great old over the last few days, and a move which some people found surprising. Some people didn't. Antoine's been looking at some of the data behind this, which you'll be able to share with us in a minute, which is really interesting. My initial reaction was a bit of surprise, based on the fact that, a transitionary year for the club, obviously. Arguably, they were going to have a kind of at least a 2-year transition, 2 to 3 year period of transition. So it'll be ongoing for a little while longer yet. But patience seems to be, as it always is in Belgium, in short supply. Some of the fans have been quite vocal about how unhappy they've been by the style of play and the way things have been going, despite securing a playoff one place. So in that sense, I think some of the fan base had been lost to Jonas, which is always going to be a kind of challenge for you. And the decision has been made. Jonas is gone. We know now he has been replaced on a temporary basis until the end of the season by Andreas Ulderink, who was Mark van Bommel's T2 during the championship winning season, and most recently Andreas was part of Philippe Clement's coaching staff at Rangers in Glasgow, where I am, which most of you will know, of course. Not too far down the road from me. So that was the first of the major departures this weekend, and is kind of the main talking point. What's your feelings about that change, Joris?
Initially, I was also a bit like, shock is too much of a term for it, but I was a bit surprised. Then later, thinking a bit more about it, a bit less. They're more or less, I guess, in a position they need to be, or that you would expect from the squad that they have at the moment with that transition year. But the level of play has been, at least the last few months, really bad. Even when they still got some points, and lately that last element also fell away. What was it? 2 points out of the last 4 games, or that. Is that correct? Because I think they actually won one quite recently, but okay, maybe there's been so many games lately. Anyway, a little bit surprised, but because of those elements, a bit less. Also, this is something I can only read in the paper, of course, but apparently in the playing squad they were also, so not only the fans but also not all the players, and I guess mainly more key players probably in that squad were not too happy themselves either. I think there was also an Alderweireld interview. This is of course just cherry picking something, but there has been a Alderweireld interview a few weeks back where he was also more or less criticizing him in quite good terms. Like this was the way they wanted to play, and which was not very well at that time as well. So yeah, I'm still not sure if it's the right call, but yeah, all these elements make it maybe difficult to stay on as a manager. And then you can still question the timing, but I guess the results indeed lately have not been good enough to keep him in the job for longer.
So my perspective, I'll actually also lump in Besnik Hasi and his departure from Mechelen. When I saw both of those exits, before looking at different stats to try to find an explanation for what went wrong, my gut feeling was unfair for De Roeck, because you look at Antwerp, it's a top 5 budget, but big cuts from the previous years. They're fourth, they're comfortably in the playoffs. You would think, he worked in a multi-year project at Westerlo, developed young players, developed talent. He seems to be a good fit. He's a fit from a personality perspective in terms of not being a huge personality. There's already, big personalities around the club, and he's a worker who's going to roll up his sleeves because that's what he did at Westerlo. So you'd think that's unfair. They gave him tools that he worked with to build a team in fourth place, and what else do they want? When you have top 3 teams that are so clearly, better than the rest of the competition. That was my gut reaction. And with Hasi at Mechelen, we actually spoke about Mechelen when I was here a couple of weeks ago, about them starting off poorly, then having a great stretch, and then seemingly being on, alternative current, sometimes very on, sometimes very off. Sometimes it just doesn't look like they know what they are supposed to do. So with Hasi, it seemed to make more sense, especially when you hear, especially over the transfer window, you heard a lot of him complaining about the quality of the players, though we are where we belong. And if, whether you're at a football club or at, I don't know, if you're at a restaurant and the chef says, well, of course we're serving shit food, look at the quality of my sous chefs, that doesn't make me want to work for him, and as a player, if I hear, of course our results are mediocre, look at what I'm working with, it doesn't make me. So if anything, the Hasi departure made sense, from a, I don't know if there were political tensions or if there was, but from the outside looking in, sure, I get it. The team is a point above relegation, maybe. And then looking into the numbers, Hasi's team was actually trending upwards, and we're getting pretty unlucky in the results, not because of their offensive play, but because of sturdier defensive play. And De Roeck's Antwerp in the last 15 matches was just catastrophic. And they are massively overperforming, and they should be where Mechelen is. And so I don't know if the Antwerp data analysts, 2 months ago started waving a flag and people only saw that they were waving a flag now, because 2 results is not enough of a of a sample size to make an appropriate decision, but 15 results is. But that's also where you have to think of, was De Roeck's priority to get results now or to develop players? So you guys have watched more Antwerp than I have. Has he developed? And I remember last time I said it's not just over a season that you're going to see; it's over 3 to 5 years that you're going to see the player development. But you had a Doumbia who was already starting to explode last year. But how many? He did give the chance to multiple younger players, and I think he would have continued to do so, and you would have seen a lot of good young players who have made mistakes maybe this year who would get better next year. So it's not a 1-year process. If they're judging him for results for this year, completely legitimate to have fired him. If they are judging on the underlying data, the underlying results, and the underlying, I don't know what their pathway for the different players are, and are they meeting their goals? Are they meeting their expectations? Are they? Every club has different milestones for their players to develop and hit. But Hasi, I think there's more of a debate, and if it was a case of clashing, behind the scenes and just change needing to happen, and them knowing that they weren't going to continue with him next season, then maybe it makes sense. Seems risky with only 3 or 4 matches left. Actually, only 2 matches left. Seems risky because they desperately need a point. They play against Charleroi, who are most likely not in any mood to give away points. And then they play against another team directly fighting for survival as well, Dender. So if was now the right time for Hasi? No. No, yes, debatable. Was a month ago the right time for him? Debatable again. Charleroi last year waited until once they were in the relegation playoffs, and then they hired De Roeck. But they waited until essentially they didn't make it. Westerlo did not wait until, Rick De Mil, not De Roeck. Westerlo did not wait, for De Mil. But I'm not going to, I don't want to say that if Mechelen gets 2 poor results and get jumped over by a couple of teams and end up in the relegation playoffs, that it's blowing up in their face. I don't think it would be because of that. But I think the case for firing Hasi is a lot grayer than the black and white with the underlying data for De Roeck at Antwerp.
Yeah, it is. It's really interesting that, hearing some of those kind of data insights, because often they aren't talked about. I suppose one of my questions for the data team at Antwerp is, where are you flagging this up? Has some poor individual been screaming about particular numbers for a while, and those numbers have been ignored, and they've stuck with it until playoff 1 was secured? Only those on the inside of this one actually know. The Hasi one is in many ways even more interesting, because I've speculated on more than one occasion this season, particularly over the last kind of 2 to 3 months, haven't I, Joris, that I definitely detected internal tensions. Who they're between specifically, I don't know, but I think it's quite clear that Besnik and the sporting director there, Tim Matthijs, don't necessarily have the best relationship. Besnik's always been kind of quite outspoken, and sometimes says things, I think, without necessarily thinking about whether he should say it publicly or not, because of the tensions that causes. But I think that Besnik in particular has been saying things in the media that have been putting pressure on him and also on the club. And obviously there have been rumours about fallouts with players, which goes back to what Antoine was saying about it seems strange, some of the things that he'd said. Would you want to play for somebody who was quite so openly critical about certain aspects? It doesn't seem like great squad management to air that stuff quite so publicly. Obviously, there's a lot of coaches, quite high profile ones, well known in Belgium, who are without a club at the moment. So there'll probably be a lot of phones ringing and kind of horse trading going on over the next few weeks, because some of these clubs obviously have decided to go down the temporary appointment routes at the moment. Same with Mechelen as well. Confirmation today that Frederik van der Bielst, who seems to have been there forever, Joris, will be taking taking the reins at Mechelen, certainly until the end of the regular season. But I think there's a fair chance he might see even the playoffs out as well while they talk to candidates and decide what they want to do there. Funnily enough, there is a link, of course, because this summer before the season started, Mechelen did talk at length to Jonas De Roeck. He was somebody that they were very, very interested in. It didn't quite go in the direction that they wanted, and they went elsewhere, which is when Besnik Hasi came back into the picture very late on. But I do wonder whether that conversation might be resumed now as well. Interestingly, I was in touch with the Big Antwerp Fan podcast and some of our friends there at De Vierkant Pal, who told me today that a lot of them would be quite keen to see either Hein van Eysenbroek, Karel Gierers, or a certain Philippe Clement end up at the Bossel. Not sure whether either of those three fancy that project at the moment, but it's understandable why they would be right up there in some of the Antwerp fans' choices, that's for sure.
On the Rook, if I can quickly jump in as well, I also want to give the caveat still, like, yeah, we're not in 14th, 5th. That's not the big deal, but like, they're 5th position. No, that's fine. Same difference. Okay, at the end of the season, not, but at the moment. But I just also want to caveat a little bit, like, of the results, like, that is. It's indeed on par, I guess. They're not overperforming either, because I don't see on the squads below them, I don't see less quality than in the current Antwerp squad as well. So I can also get that that's another element that could play a role there. Just an addition, like they still have quite some players, are proven in the league and might be high on the payroll, maybe not necessarily always being consistent as well. And he definitely, also another caveat, he definitely has been dealt some bad cards from the start, I think, as well, if they were going to judge him on these results. But definitely something I would just wanted to jump in as well. In Hasi, with Hasi gone, okay, disregarding, there was a little discontinuity at the end of last season as well, but that's also the longest reigning manager in the Jupiler Pro League gone now. And ironically, now the longest serving one is one that got his merits more or less, I guess, even more in the Challenger Pro League than in the Pro League in Dirigat. Bit of a surprising name to be now on that list. We think we believe there's reasons behind that, don't we, Scott?
Yeah, I'll never be able to get my head round the fact that the currently longest serving coach now is the T1, who arguably is the least deserving to still be in their post based on kind of sporting merit of any kind. The irony of that is something that perhaps, again,
he got promoted. He got his team promoted. Give him credit for that.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah. That's very true. And I think,
not a particular fan of the direction of the club, but
yeah,
the coaching staff made it work.
Yeah,
I didn't believe in it, and they did. So
I think as well, like, yeah. Well, you mentioned it, Antoine. I think it's worth bearing in mind that if you're Beerschot and you're looking at your situation at the moment, despite the wider context, going back down to the CPL with Dirk still in post isn't necessarily a bad thing, having had that experience of being able to finish the job with them. So we know he's on a very lucrative contract. Again, that's something we've talked about quite a lot here at the BFP, and how the costs for Beerschot to make that change are kind of too great, particularly when he's tied in with all of his coaching staff as well, who are on very similar terms. We understand that they're also all on pretty big deals. So from a financial point of view, they don't have a great deal of leeway despite having wealthy owners there. It's an interesting one to watch that. We made our piece quite a while ago. We spent a lot of the early part of the season not being able to understand why the change was being made. And then when you do a little bit of digging and talk to some people, you realise that obviously once the fuller context lands, the bigger picture is always different to what it appears from the outside.
One question: what were the names of the managers that you had mentioned again at Antwerp?
The three recurring names were Van Eysenbroek, which seems to be Heinz mentioned, for every job going these days, of course. Philippe Clement, who's obviously free now, having left Rangers, and Karel Gererts as well, seemed to be the kind of top three that a lot of Antwerp fans were hoping to see come in for next season.
No, I thought you had mentioned Vranken. That's a name that I'd seen, but I was gonna make the just the coincidence that Vranken, Philippe, Clément, and Gerards all have the same agent, so it would have been pretty easy for Antwerp to negotiate any one of the three.
Yeah, that would have been a quick conversation. Yeah, time saving. Yeah.
First choice, no, okay, let's go to page B. Okay, no, let's go to page C and let's compare notes.
I suspect Philippe will want a little bit of time out. He did actually post something on his own social media today to say that he's had a few days out from being sacked at Rangers to kind of digest that experience, which I think from his point of view was pretty brutal. It's something I've been asked, being based in Scotland myself, something the kind of Scottish sports media ask me kind of quite a lot when I'm talking to them about the perspective on that from the outside. A classic case, perhaps, of the right manager at the wrong time for what, at the moment, in Philippe's case, was a very badly run football club. So I think he would be very wise to take some time out and let the wounds, the bruises, and scabs of his experience there heal a bit before jumping in wherever that is. Although whether Philippe would want to come back to Belgium in the short term is a different question as well. Speaking of Philippe Clement, let's move on to talking about another game that involved one of his former sides. The Battle of Flanders this weekend finished one apiece, and Club Brugge, Joris, probably their own worst enemies, allowing a very late equaliser that, in watching it a number of times now, is completely avoidable with some pretty basic defending, I think.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I guess my feelings about that are, of course, different, but than most, than all club fans. But yeah, to be honest, it was quite a tame Battle of Flanders until those final 5, maybe 10 minutes. I believe, especially from Ghent's side. Um, yeah, not still struggling to win though. Ghent as well, like they're still maintain at the buzzer their I'm throwing out all kind of sports terms from other sports in this episode. Is what I'm noticing myself here. But to keep that unbeaten streak going. But I believe that's now 6 draws and only 2 wins as well. So that ratio is should better be reversed for Milicevic. I think last week I actually mentioned that wrong, so to correct myself from last week as well. Like, I think I hadn't counted the match that was ongoing, then I only mentioned 4 draws at that point. But yeah, now it's already 6. Also, on the other hand, Club Brugge, they were also not super impressive or anything, but you would expect them to see this game out anyway, or kill it off, actually, more in the case of Talbi. Who had a few big chances, and Jutgla also had a really big chance, which could have been offside, but we will never know since he didn't finish. The ball in the net, didn't let the ball finish in the net. But yeah, they were not playing they played like more or less the bare minimum to maybe win this game until the final 5 minutes. There were some more chances for Ghent, who actually didn't play badly anyway. Like they were having a lot of the ball as well at during spells of the game, but they couldn't really create much. In the beginning, there were a few chances though as well for them. But yeah, Club Brugge really failing to finish this game on the counter attack, which seems to be the strongest suit this season as well. So to give them the ball when they have to have the ball. I mean, obviously they're still among the best sides in the league and they can do it, but they're less. there seems to be less confidence in there. Of course, can't unsee the fact that both Tsolis and Onyedika were missing in this game for them. Especially Onyedika. I've mentioned that already a few times in this podcast. I think maybe even last week. That he's such a crucial player in that core to really to keep them balanced enough to avoid situations as that final one where final fatal one as well, to put it a bit more dramatic than it is. And also I think the way they got the lead was a bit lucky. On the other hand, as well, like Jutglas shot, Van den Bergen probably should have done better. And then also when if he hit the bar, it's a bit unlucky that the ball bounces back in without bouncing from the goalkeeper, as you sometimes see, but just from the soil going into to the bouncing the wrong direction for him, the right direction for Club Brugge. It was an odd goal as well. But on Onyedika, I actually have some more stats on that. They're not completely conclusive and complete stats, but they've only gotten one win in the 5 games they played without him. That was the very late win against Westerlo as well, so that easily could not have been a win. So they got over 40% of the points when he wasn't there, and with him they get 68.1% of the points, or 2.4 points per game. Which is definitely a big difference, and a lot more the averages that you want to see for a title contender as well, of course. And I mean, it's not all. It's too simplified to put it all on that, of course. But that he is a big factor in that squad is definitely, to me at least, that's a clear case.
And Dante van Zier, Antoine, seems to be warming up to life in Ghent now.
Warming up again. It's. I mean, when he left to go to MLS, I thought it was very interesting. I thought it was I was thinking that it would be a preview of what MLS could become and what it still can become in terms of being a good springboard for players going in between, let's say, France to Holland, or Eredivisie, Belgium, Scandinavia, MLS, and then Big Five. Or to other top European leagues. I was a little bit surprised to see him come back so quickly to Belgium. I mean, he left Belgium on a tear. He comes back pretty much on a tear as well. I think he's one of those players, just like Serhou Guirassy at Dortmund, that is tearing it up in the Bundesliga and had struggled significantly at Rennes before, or other strikers like Ekitike, who went to PSG and then came back. Or there's a lot of players like that do well in specific leagues, and that have trouble taking, even if it's not a step up, a lateral step, let's put it that way. And for Van Zier, I mean, the duo that he was up front when he was at Union was, it's still probably the best offensive duo that I've seen in Belgium in the last 5 years. And I think that he, from a talent perspective, slightly stands out at Ghent on the current squad right now.
Yeah, interesting. You kind of talk about his time there in the MLS, because we've seen this week as well another player named for themselves in Belgium, and Kevin Denke, obviously getting his big move to Cincinnati, has started extremely well there. The Cincinnati fans have already begun what is of no surprise to us, the beginning of a love affair, I think, as long as Kevin's there. I said to a Cincinnati fan, actually, who I got to know a little bit better because I did the Cincinnati fan podcast round tour the week that transfer was confirmed, telling the Cincinnati fans all about Kevin Denke, who knew essentially nothing about him. There was a good chance that if he started well, that he's somebody they would remember for a very long time, and he has really hit the ground running in that league, which is of no surprise to us at all. Let's move to a game at the bottom of the Pro League now. A game and a result, in fact, at the debut with Sabi Stein that is a proper dagger to the heart of Bern Stork's Kortrijk. Well beaten in the end, 4-2, despite putting up a reasonable fight in the game, all things considered. After a poor start, they kind of got back into it and made a game of it in the end. But the result ultimately, Joris, leaves Kortrijk in dire straits. Doesn't really begin to cover it now. Really, they needed something from this game.
They definitely did, and the implications for Sint-Truiden are also big, especially after what happened in the day after against Mechelen for Beerschot. But yeah, conceding four for the fourth time this season already for Kortrijk, that's one of the indicators that things are not going well. Of course. They did come back indeed to 2-2 for a while. Stork already made a really quick change with bringing the Neve in for Sissako around the half-hour mark already, so he didn't wait. And it seemed to pay off when they came back to 2-2. But and Sint-Truiden again throwing away a 2-goal lead. At that point, that wasn't looking good for them. But yeah, they did manage to put a few more behind Illich's back in the end. Was it Illich playing? I hope so. Grabbing the last chance to avoid play downs, potentially avoid play downs for Sint-Truiden. And La Poussin was a standout, not a surprising one maybe, but a standout player, I guess, as well, with a few good assists. Also, the Van Weesemaal's goal anyway deserves a mention. There was a really good finish as well. Both assist and the finish were really good. And yeah, Sint-Truiden at two ends now. On Saturday, it really looked more like only for the up end, trying to sneak out of the play downs. But now, given Beerschot won a game again, and them playing each other this upcoming weekend as well, also for not having to look down, at least for the straight relegation spots, too much. Very crucial win for them, keeping the distance to Beerschot at 10 points, which is massive at this stage. It anyway would have been a difficult task for Beerschot, but this win, I think, puts them out of sight for them. Here and even if they would have to play playoffs still.
Yeah, you mentioned Loic Lapazan, Joris. He is proving to be, Antoine, I think, a really smart pickup for Sint-Truiden. Slightly opportunistic on their own part, obviously, because he has a long-standing relationship with Felice Mazu. I remember saying, I think it was pretty soon after he joined, that I felt that he would have quite a big say in how Sint-Truiden's season went for a number of reasons, and it's certainly looking that way at the moment.
I always get surprised when I see La Poussin on that team because he was such a core player of those couple of years of the golden years of Union as they were coming back up. He was part of that core that also got recruited from Virton with Anthony Maurice to play promotion and to go up. But he is, he should not be on a team fighting against relegation. He should comfortably be, especially when you see some of his teammates, ex-teammates, where they are now. he should be, or if he wants to stay in Belgium, because it's very easy for me to say, oh, he's got the level for X, Y, Z. I could see him mid-table in Ligue 1 easily. A team like Reims could definitely use him. I look more towards the south from a linguistic perspective, but maybe he's comfortable in Belgium. Maybe he also has been there for a while and wanted to stay, not too far away from Wallonia. Therefore, Saint Truden, it's not too far away. Let's put it that way. But he is a great pickup by them, specifically when they're playing at home on that turf. Just really smooth with the ball, really quick decision making. Everything that you teach kids, when you're supposed to look up before you get the ball, and as soon as you have it, if you don't know what you're doing with the ball when you get the ball, it's already too late, and it's that you didn't scan properly. But if you if DAZN wants to have an isolated camera on his head as he runs around, whether it's on ball or off ball, don't know what the physios are doing, to massage his neck to make sure that he doesn't get blocked. But my God, this is his head on a swivel all the time. It's really nice to see a midfielder like that. Very much an Iniesta. He's not at all an Iniesta type, but just from a purely scanning motion, and you don't have to be at the highest level of your craft, like at playing at City, although City is not the highest level of the craft today. Playing at Liverpool or Real or Atleti, they make it look easy. And when you look at La Poussin playing for a team that's struggling to stay in the JPL, you could see, at his level, he also makes it look easy. Slimani playing with Leuven makes it look easy, sometimes too easy, and you get annoyed that, come on, a little bit more. So great pickup by them. If he stays another year afterwards, I don't know how long his contract runs, but if he stays another year, then I think that's a great piece to build around.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned his kind of scanning ability in that part of his game, because modern football now is moving more and more away from position-specific roles for players. It's becoming more and more important for players to be able to be multifaceted in lots of ways. Being able to play in obviously more than one position, and the scanning part of the game is much underrated. Academy scout coaches will tell you lots about the importance of that. They have lots of fun with that again, because they develop young players and encourage them to play in at least three positions and be comfortable with that. So Lapizan definitely fits that very modern mold of being able to fulfill more than one position, and probably can play positions he's never played before. He's actually that smart and intelligent a footballer. I wonder yet, as I was saying, whether he will, if St Truden don't manage to escape outright, which they could yet do, they still have the chance of doing that, whether he has the chance of being pivotal in any relegation jump-off match. I had a feeling at the beginning he might, and he may yet do that. Another link. Yeah.
Sorry to jump in, but Ben would kill us if we don't mention the stat he found on La Poussin as well. I think La Poussin only has lost one game so far this season as well, and out of all teams against Dender, and not the Dender of the beginning of the season, but when they were already a bit of in a slump. That's the one victory they got in the last 2 months, I believe, even. So that's but still, yes. La Poussin only lost one.
Yeah, some of the stats are absolutely fascinating. And actually, in thinking about Lapizan, obviously he was left out of the Union squad for the first part of the season for reasons that everybody knows about now. But when he came back in, Lapizan coming back in also coincides with the time in which Union really started to motor a bit and kind of come together. So he was definitely a factor in that, not necessarily an isolated one, but it's no coincidence that when he comes back into the side, Union started to go on a run and to improve. So his value in a team camp goes beyond what he brings on the pitch, that's for sure.
And at the same time, of course, him missing out on that first part of the season at Union is part of the explanation of that stat, of course.
Yeah, of course, yeah. It's interesting that we've been doing a mini deep dive on Lapizan there, because we should talk about his former side, Union, who this weekend romped to a 4-1 win. Were generally very impressive in overrunning a Dender side that didn't really know how to approach this tactically, I don't think. Obviously trying to contain Union's numerous threats, but not being able to really contain anybody in the end. And as I was saying earlier, Union, big winners of the weekend, the overall weekend again. We've been saying for ages, everybody, this title race isn't over yet. They're going to have a part in the conversation. And as the weeks go by, the gap is narrowing. I think their confidence is rising, and I think there's a feeling, as I said, I think it was 3 or 4 weeks ago, that they're coming to a peakish type form period at just the right point in the season, and obviously 4th season running as a playoff one side, they're more experienced, despite having a lot of new players who've not necessarily been in this position before themselves, but they do have a coaching staff behind them and a club who've kind of been here before. And you just wonder, because I can certainly see their confidence has gone up a few gears, and I think they know that they will have a say in this, whether it goes to their way or to another couple of clubs. But it's starting to get a lot more interesting, I think, as we head into the playoffs.
They are a very good team. They are very well-oiled machine. They have difference makers at every line. Up front, I've already spoken about Ivanovic. I'd forgotten a couple weeks ago about David, another last name David Canadian playing and showing himself in the Belgian league. Jonathan David is currently playing right now in Dortmund, but for me, the standout player that match was Anouari Tailaj, in terms of the difference that he's able to make. I mean, Rasmussen controlled the midfield. I think he also scored. So he brought something to the stability of the block. But Elaj, I remember seeing him both with the young Anderlecht or the U23s and young Genk, and you could tell that the moment that he would switch from being a very good youth to understanding the demands of professional football, that if he could get that he would be a very special player. And Union have themselves another pépite, a gem there. It's also a deep team, the Union team. They have a decent amount of, or not a decent amount, but we haven't seen Castro Montes in a long time, and they've been able to do without. Van Out has also been out for a little bit of time now, and they've been able to adjust fine. They have Husseini off the bench, Sofiane Boufal, who is a really, was at different part. I mean, I remember him from Angers, and really special player, and you could tell that he can still make the difference. Ball at his feet, and I think they were trying to feed him for a goal in the last couple of minutes of that match. They have what's funny is you have a player like Rodriguez, who last year played seemed to play a key part in the offensive trident that they had, and this year he's more of a super sub, if any. But for me, they also have one of the best young Belgian goalkeepers that you will start seeing probably next year, Vic Chambard, also ex-Genk. I don't know what they feed the goalkeepers over there, but it's definitely something. Chambard is great with his feet. I still don't understand how nobody gave him a shot to be a first-team goalkeeper. No, they've. It's again what we were talking about last time of being able to redefine yourself season after season with the same formula and being able to. I mean, they've now. I think they're going to have multiple profitable years with every year reinvesting more and more and more, whether it's into infrastructure or into first team salaries or transfer fees, etc. So, yeah, Alex, Philippe, kudos, and all of your team, all of the support team, your ownership. It's well done. And then in 2 weeks, they'll just be 3 to 6 points back, and who knows? But if I'm Genk or Bruges, I do not go into my matches against Union as a heavy favorite.
Yeah, absolutely. Fearless and relentlessly consistent. First part of the season aside, not worth writing off at any point. And I know Joris, Joris is quite appreciative of how dangerous a side they are. For lots of reasons. Antoine mentioned.
Sorry, yeah, again to jump in, but I think very, very, very crucial game will be the final game Genk Union before the playoffs as well, for deciding if they are really going to be in the race or not, and if so, in which position you would put them in that race as well. That depends a lot. I think a lot hinges on that, even though, of course, it's just a pre-playoff game. Yeah, depending on how that result goes for them, things could change a bit. For both sides as well, just also mentally and for the confidence. Apart from the points cap that might decrease or increase, of course, in that case. But yeah, just indeed, very, very appreciative of them. Fully dominated this game. And I still don't get how David takes his penalties and still they go in, but it seems to work. Okay, I have to comment it, and then just small touch on Dender though as well. I mentioned 4 goals, 4-time that Kortrijk conceded 4 goals for Dender. Unfortunately, it's already the 5th time even. So yeah, that explains where the situation they are in, of course, as well. And also, they did concede yet another penalty. That's 7 in total now, with most of them actually in the last few games as well. And in addition to 5 red cards, of which also many of those came in the last month or 2, I guess. So some disciplinary issues biting them in the ass, I guess. Lately.
Or it's the fact that they have a squad that's discovering first division, discovering the speed of execution, and are just not as quick, are half a step behind at times. And when you're half a step behind, your stud is slightly higher than it should be. It's accidentally somewhere. I mean, if you look at some of the reds, I think of David Hunchar's red, I think last month or a month and a half ago. Obviously, spent quite some time with him in Beveren, and you could tell that he was surprised because there was no malice in the tackle. And it's just speed of execution is faster, and reaction time is not a split second; it's a millisecond, and before you know it, you're involved in an action that you are barely controlling, and so I think that's also partially responsible.
Antoine mentioned a minute ago what Genk do with their goalkeepers. I thought it was interesting. Recently, the Belgian FA confirmed that Genk's goalkeeping coach would be joining the national team staff. He will remain at Genk, but will be coming on to be the new national team goalkeeping coach as well. I thought was very, very interesting, especially when you now add into the mix that it looks very much like Thibaut Courtois will be coming back into the picture. But the fact he's coming on board suggests that there's a general acceptance that the coaching of goalkeepers at Genk is much to be admired.
Caveat, if I'm not mistaken, that's just a caretaker role for the moment, at least for at the Red Devils. But yeah, anyway, side note.
Yeah, it's an interesting choice, though, isn't it? In terms of kind of recognition, I think for the work that's going on there, they think that's the best approach at the moment. The next game this weekend is one we've already alluded to. We've seen the fallout from it. Besnik Hasi's gone. Beerschot managing to get their third win of the season, putting up a bit of a fight against a Mechelen side that really kind of looked absolutely rudderless this weekend. Lots of blame flying around amongst players on the pitch, and lots of frustrations as well. And I think Beerschot managing to get this one over the line, Joris, perhaps more because there might have been a greater sense of team spirit on the pitch on a Beerschot's sense than there was on Mechelen's part. Just kind of miserable for them this weekend, playing more than half the game against 10 men and not managing to get something out of it. And it was just one of those weekends that from a Mechelen perspective, where everything that could have went wrong kind of did, and they weren't able to profit out of the things in the game that did go their way.
Yeah, and at the same time, you can say everything that could go wrong for Beerschot inside the same game also did go wrong. And Mechelen, unfortunately, it still didn't do anything with it. Okay, granted, there were 2 offside goals for them as well, but they were correct decisions. So yeah, that doesn't help. But like a red card for Beerschot to make it more exciting, and then even conceding another penalty as well. Being saved then by the reserve goalkeeper in Matthias. That's he's a strange. He seems to be a strange. Maybe not himself the strange bloke, but like there seems to be something around him because he was also the goalkeeper when he was at Antwerp that had to fill in the very weird COVID Cup final as when he was like third goalkeeper, I think, for Antwerp. And they won the cup with him in goal. And apart from that, he doesn't have that many credentials even inside Belgian football. He has played for Beerschot also this season. I think he started the season still as first goalkeeper actually, but he was replaced by Shinton, who got that red card. But yeah, I guess we talked a lot about the Mechelen side of things already. Beerschot, on the other hand, like I mentioned before, they have this game against Sint-Truiden. If they win that one, they have like the slimmest of chances to, after playoffs, still get into that playoff, the other playoff against the Challenger Pro League side. But I don't think anyone really seems, that doesn't seem likely to anyone, even to themselves. But they did put up a fight, definitely, and they did get more points than the last time they were in the league as well. This time around, with less wins, so that also shows that they maybe have been in more games, and then they drew a bit to many of them, of course. Then last time, would it really have given them a better chance of saving them because of the platform, the current format? Yes, but apart from that, probably not. But they have the longest lasting manager in the league so far. Yeah.
And just on Beerschot, Antoine, where do you think that squad is placed? Obviously, in the event of an inevitable relegation, and there's any point in speculating on that one any longer. They will lose some of this squad, of course, anyway, I think. But where do you think this squad is kind of placed in going down to maybe come straight back up?
I mean, who from the squad do you think is staying? I think that's the better way of approaching it, and from there, I mean, I'm actually going to look through their sort of their skeleton and their spinal. Looking at their midfielders, the Sanusis, the Hendersons, the when you let's assume that 2 teams go up and 2 teams go down, and the winner prevails of the relegation, or the JPL team prevails in the relegation playoffs. So let's assume that the two current teams go up. That's Zulte and Molenbeek. And going down would be Kortrijk and Beerschot. And you would have Kortrijk, Beerschot, Raal, Patro, Beveren, Lierse, Lommel, Eupen. Where do I put them? I see them having more of a season like Eupen, except Eupen still had a core part of their JPL team that stayed down. They were overpaying a lot of players, and so JPL clubs did not want to overpay for players that were participants in a relegation season, and those players did not want to go for for a discount to other clubs. That is their right. And that is the objective of the club, to then negotiate salaries better going forward. But Eupen, a lot was written about them at the beginning of August, where look at this squad. They have so much quality. There's no way that they can't compete for the top. Within a week or 10 days, it was a fire sale, apparently. And then after the end of the summer mercato, it was, actually, they're all here. And so we're going to push for results again. So there wasn't a unifying, clear direction from the get-go. It seemed like the direction of the wind one day was massively different than the direction the next day. Beerschot, the direction of the wind is, there's just, it's tornado. They're gonna have to reman at least 80% of their starting lineup. They're going to have to do so with a management team that seems to be changing every 3 months. When you speak to players on that squad, you realize that they are very much in it with the coaching staff and themselves. But when players say that it almost feels like it's us versus them, with the them being the rest of the club, whether it's senior employees or management or ownership. I don't want to put employees there, but management and ownership, not the best situation to have in terms of club cohesion. And players speak. And so players are not going to want to come where they see an exodus with players saying, run, don't come here. The conditions are mediocre. The training ground has been apparently approved to be done for the last 3 years and nothing has happened. There's inconsistency and instability. So I think the way to the result is going to be similar to an Eupen this season, I believe. I think next season Eupen is going to be, depending on what they want to do, but they can only go up, I would say, from here. But I think Beerschot will get to essentially middle to bottom third of the CPL in a completely different manner than Eupen did. Eupen they've gotten unlucky in a lot of matches, but they should be doing better. Let's be very clear. I don't think Beerschot next season will be able to do much better than top 8.
Interesting. You heard it here first. Looking into his crystal ball, Antoine Gobin on behalf of the BFP.
There you go. But again, kudos to the coaching staff for when they took over last year for a coach that was loved and that reluctantly left Beerschot, and fans were sad and players were sad and everybody was writing them off, and they held, just like 3 years before Vincent Evrard held with the Molenbeek team, despite everything that you were hearing about Textor and the Brazilians and changing and no, they held. So people from the outside looking in can say a lot, media can speak a lot, a lot of storylines can be done, and sometimes that helps build cohesion with those 25 people in the locker room that much stronger.
Yeah, I think that's definitely been the case there, actually, because there has been a lot of exterior noise around the club of different kinds, and to kind of hold it together all things considered. And you can tell I'm a big body language person. There won't be a week that goes by in the BFP without me referencing it somewhere at some club once. You can tell that a lot of those players, despite some of their personal relationships and dynamics and those dynamics with other individual people inside the club, that some of them do want to play for each other. And there have been periods in games this season where, you know, they've really stood up for one another, I think, despite still not getting the results. Speaking of getting results, the big game of the weekend in many ways, although in recent years the Classico has been a pale imitation of the massive fixture it has been historically in Belgian football, saw Anderlecht go to Schlesien and win 2-0. Could have been more. We saw a brilliant goal this weekend from Torgan Hazard, Joris. Really, really nice. Standard really probably we're never going to get anything out of this game. When you look at the outputs they've been putting into the majority of their games this season, my worry coming into this one is what sort of Anderlecht were actually going to turn up. And I was certain that this was going to finish goalless at one point. But yeah, Anderlecht, even without Dolberg, managing to bring the quality that's been missing far too often. Sometimes it just needs a spark from one of those players who makes them a different side, and we saw that at least once this weekend from Torgan Hazard.
Who, despite that, actually had a terrible game, I guess, as well. But he had that splash, of course, that we know he still has. But yeah, this is a very disappointing game from both sides, I guess, mainly from Standard, especially considering even though Gent are getting good results, drawing both against Genk, and here I made a mistake myself, but and Cluvere in recent weeks, they are still draws, of course. They really could have put themselves in a slightly more realistic chance of the getting into a Champions playoffs now, but yeah, they squandered it, and like mainly the way, of course, you can lose, but they didn't really. It didn't really feel like they went into the game with this idea of yes, let's take that spot, try to attack that spot of Hint in the Champions playoffs. Didn't come. Also, that we're talking about this game this late is okay. It's also partially because of how our format usually works, but also is indicative in this case, maybe just about how this game indeed doesn't have the allure this time around. I mean, it has been different as well. Also, not having away fans, it doesn't help. It might be a good decision, but it doesn't help to really put it really get this fiery atmosphere either. And yeah, Hazard, brilliant goal. Apart from that, Anderlecht doing the double against Standard this season. I guess that's a good thing, nonetheless, especially for the fans. But yeah, and on Anderlecht they have the very random balanced stats. Away points haul equals the home points haul as well, and also with the same amount of wins. So twice 24 points, 7 wins, 3 draws, and 4 losses. And it was Standard's 4th home loss, but yeah, that's more about like how Sclesien maybe is not the fortress it used to be, but that's also not completely surprising with what they're dealing with at the moment as well. Have to deal with.
Yeah, we've been talking quite a lot about data this week and the insights behind the apparent external narrative. How much are Standard overachieving, Antoine?
Very much. I think the only way, or rather than try to sound like a smartass, they are really just doing better than Beerschot, and they're more or less tied with Kortrijk in terms of being the team that has conceded the most, or that is most negative in XGs conceded versus XGs scored. And so it doesn't lead to an exact, expected points, because some of those matches could have ended not just 5-1, but maybe 4-1, so that expected goal doesn't count as much, as a goal that goes from 1-0 to 0-0. But they are, I believe, the worst offensive team in the league, in terms of chance creation, in terms of quality chance creation, in terms of XGs, in terms of anything other than set pieces, and set pieces as corners. From a defensive perspective, they have been overperforming as well. So they have been their goalkeeper has been Ekpolo has been above average for the league, and they've also had chances, or their opponents have been statistically worse against them than against other teams. So that can come from Sclessin, that can come from just unlucky bounces on an unlucky day. And, somebody a lot smarter than me once said, you can win a match by either being good or being talented. Or I'm sorry, being talented or being lucky. See, I don't even know the saying. So you get being talented or being lucky can win you a match. To win a season, you have to be both. And they are getting extremely lucky in this season. If they had 2-3 matches with fewer luck, with less luck, they would be right in the thick of relegation playoffs right now.
Yeah, that's interesting, kind of to get some of the data behind the numbers there, a lot of which won't surprise many, but it's just interesting to kind of underline that, I think. The final game of the weekend was at Dendrief, Leuven drawing 0-0 with Westerlo. And this game, Joris, had, I don't know, maybe the 0-0 had an air of inevitability, the 0-0 loss of it all.
In a way, yes. In a way, not, because Leuven actually had a few quite terrible misses as well. They could have broken that deadlock, but and they might that might come back to them as well, as I guess, because a win probably would have been unofficially at least safety for them. Now, yeah, it's they still have games against Kortrijk and Sint-Truiden, so the cliche of having a few finals to go before the actual important part of the season would begin if they don't come out of those well. Yeah, but what might be worth mentioning is Westerlo keeping a clean sheet, even though it was because of a few bad misses as well. Definitely something that doesn't happen too often this season. But yeah, for both sides, I guess it goes but a bit more for Westerlo, since they need to leapfrog a few sides still. Everyone in that area is picking up some points, so is a draw enough? I think both sides can be unhappy with it as well. Yeah. The only good thing for them, I guess, going is also, well, like, they might not need an additional win anymore, depending on other results, because they're in favor against most of the other sides. They would be able to equal with a draw, but not all of them, actually, I believe. But yeah, not an easy ask on them anyway. They need to pick up some points for sure now.
Yeah, and I suppose the fact that the Westerlo are spending a lot of money, Antoine, kind of underlines how desperate they are not to finally get sucked into the relegation playoffs and escape that before we reach that stage. Because spending the amount of money that they are, I don't think they're really in danger of going down in the worst case scenario. But, they're on the precipice of something at the moment that they don't want to be on. I think a lot of people sometimes don't realise quite how much money they are spending.
I think they've been regularly atop, other than the Liam Fraser season, actually this season, I don't know how they convinced Saint-Etienne to pay 7 or 8 million for Lucas Tassin. Mazel tov to the agent for working his magic there. But they the thing is, they've regularly been in the red and sometimes in the deep red in the last 5 years. Um, they have also tremendously invested in the infrastructure there,
Mhm.
whether it's
Yeah.
new pitches, whether it's new training facility, new
Mhm.
offices as well. Uh, People very much forget non-sporting staff, but they are just as important in terms of making
Mm.
sure that everybody on the pitch and in the locker room is surrounded by people with a smile and happy to come to work. And a lot of fans think, you know, you work in social media, or you work in marketing or in sales or ticketing at a football club. Of course, you're happy to go to work, and it's tough to go to work when you had to work over the weekend and you had to work and there was a loss, and you're bummed, and everything that everybody speaks about to you is how bad the team played or how good the team played. And even when you're out of work, it's difficult to leave work, at every level, whether you're a kit person to to ticketing, to finance, to accounting, whatever it is. Um, uh, that type of recognition from Westerlo ownership and management to give new offices for everybody and not just brand new shiny locker rooms uh, is a nice touch to the the family element of that club. Um, you mentioned that they're sort of out of reach for relegation. They're just 3 or 4 points clear of the playoff spot, and anything can happen over a home and away. And if it's a Ral or a Beveren or a Patro, um, the difference between the quality of players at Westerlo and second division clubs is huge, but it's just as big as the difference as there was. I mean, I saw multiple Westerlo matches last year, and I was in attendance for the match that they won at home against Anderlecht. And if you were to ask me, a year and a half ago, what's bigger, the gap between Anderlecht and Westerlo, or between Westerlo and Beveren? It's yeah. So over 2 matches, anything can happen. I The fact that they're in the relegation playoff means they're not safe from relegation. Um, do I think they deserve to be there? Not at all. Um, they are probably, yeah. I think one win gets them in. I think 2 draws. Yeah. Who do they play against? Do they play against? Sorry, I'm going to check. Anderlecht and Beerschot. It's easy to see which match they have to win. Sorry, no disrespect to Anderlecht. But uh, yeah, it is. I like thinking that healthy projects, whether it's Belgium or France or wherever, are projects that are profitable and viable. Um, the long-term viability at Westerlo is being able to pump out players year after year after year,
Mm.
and that only comes with being able to both recruit them and also recruit them when they're younger. They're on the other side of Antwerp, so the catchment area that they're going to be competing against is going to be closer to Saint STVV and Genk and the Lierse and the Flanders area, and maybe even southern Holland. So very different than, for example, a Beveren, which is on the other side of Antwerp, on the linkerkant, and they have to compete against Ghent, against Brugge, against also some southern Dutch clubs, and even against Antwerp. But um, Westerlo is in it's a nice position to be in longer term, in terms of nice infrastructure, stable infrastructure. Um, you can live in Antwerp and go out there and be within a half hour, 40 minutes of the training center, half hour. And so for players, that is important as well. Being able to not live in the middle of nowhere, like if you're playing, I don't know, for a Battle or back then, or like Virton, or it's not sexy to move there and to convince your family to move there. Did not want to say Genk out of respect for you, Joris. But yeah, it's they're in a position where their project obviously only makes sense in first division. And now that they're in first division, I feel like they should be at a point where they can tone it down on some salary and some types of players that they bring on, and really, like, did they need to go spend 2 to 4 million on players like Frigan, or Union did not promote and immediately start spending 2 to 5 million on players. They went slowly. They kept a base. They recruited for free. They still recruit for free players, whether it's whether they're offensive players or defenders, and they're not always 100% guaranteed, but it feels like at times they're going too fast for where they actually are. But I mean, I respect Hassan, and we have a very good relationship with Chit and Gaia, and I've always told him that, and I had conversations with Jonas De Roeck when he was coach over there, and he had a great relationship with Wim de Decker. They know each other very well. That's probably the team that we played the most friendly against, because the two clubs got along so well, and it was once there, once at our place. And I mean, I would like to see it higher up every year in the JPL, just to give other clubs another nice role model to look up to, essentially.
Some brilliant points. Very, very well made there, I thought. And there we have it. Another week in Belgian football. And it's been a busy week. Busier than normal, certainly. That's the way it feels. So that's why you've got a bumper episode this week, everybody. Don't say we're not good to you here. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. Antoine, we will definitely get you back soon. I know we said that last time we spoke, but we rather like having you around. So we'll definitely get you back soon. Joris, same time next week for you and me, perhaps?
Maybe, yeah, but I feel like there's something brewing there on with the other two people in this podcast now. But yeah, no, I'll happily join, of course. Yes,
this podcast is a family, because there are animals out of shot that our listeners can't even see in these houses that have been with us. So it may have been three voices in your ears. But there's more people around than that.
Yeah,
if you like what we do, yeah,
always short and snappy. Yes, okay. This didn't help to make that point. Never mind.
If you like what we do, please do feel free to leave us a little review on your podcast platform of choice. That's always very helpful in helping new people find us. New people are finding us all the time. Most of our listeners, by the way, are actually in Belgium now. Some of you may not know that, but that's very nice for us. Long may that continue. If you're new to the BFP as well, welcome on board. A few people got in touch with me recently to say, I've just found you guys. I didn't even know you were there, to which I always reply, why on earth not? Who have you been listening to instead that you shouldn't have? Yeah, that's just about it for this week's episode of the BFP. We'll be back with you next week to do it all over again. Whatever you're up to, stay safe, and we'll speak to you soon on another episode of the Belgian Football Podcast.